As I was saying before, I'm Paul Dickey. I'm from Idaho State University Continuing Education Workforce Training Department. Thank you for joining us today. So this is basically an introductory presentation about podcasts. Now, what is a podcast? Does anyone here know what a podcast is? Ray does. Anyone else? Trent's going, I think so. Gary, we know you don't.
It has to do something with whales, right?
Whales, exactly. Yes, every podcast has whales. So a podcast, basically, think of it as a talk radio show almost. You can't hear me?
I can turn it up.
Yeah, because I think I'm...
Go ahead, Jeanette, sit down over there. And we've got coffee and water and donuts.
Thank you. Sure. I'm going to wait until, so the gentleman in the back can hear. Test. Oh, wow. Yeah. Wow. Can you hear me now, sir? Excellent. Wow. Okay. I'll try to remember to face the microphone when I speak. So, what is a podcast? Well, a podcast, think of it as a... I'm going to take this off during the presentation. Is that okay? Okay. Yeah. So, think of a podcast as a... I'm going to move this up a little further. As a kind of talk radio show. I mean, we've all heard talk radio shows, through our entire lives. We probably all have our favorites. The difference is a podcast is a talk radio show that is pre-recorded and posted on the internet waiting for you. So what I mean by that is that someone has pre-recorded this podcast on whatever subject that they decided to. They've taken that audio recording and they've posted it on a platform that you can access from the internet and then listen to for your enjoyment anytime you feel like it. So unlike a talk show, a radio talk show, it's not based on, you listening isn't based on their schedule, you listening is based on your schedule. Come on in. I've just started.
Joyce, go ahead and have a seat.
You can still hear me? Excellent. Please let me know if you have any issues hearing me at all, okay? And if someone asks questions, I'll be sure to repeat them so you can hear their questions as well. So that adds a very large level of convenience when you're listening. So again, you can choose when to listen to it. You can choose to listen to it at any point. Also, what's great about it is most of you probably have in your pocket a device to listen to it right now. If you have a smartphone in your pocket, you have the capability of listening to a podcast. That means that you can listen to that podcast anywhere you go. So it's a radio talk show almost on any subject that you can think of in your pocket waiting for you. Now, why should you listen to a podcast? Let me go back. Because podcasts, again, they're like a radio talk show, but it's almost on any subject you can think of. Trent, what's one of your favorite hobbies?
My favorite hobbies, medieval history.
Medieval history. I can guarantee you there's a podcast on medieval history. Ray, what's one of your hobbies?
Photography.
Photography. I can guarantee you there's a podcast on photography. So almost any hobby or interest that you have, there's probably a podcast on it. Because podcasts have been around for almost over 10 years now. They're getting way more popular nowadays because more and more people have smartphones in their pocket. The thing is, with podcasts, most people start their podcast because they're passionate about a subject. And they're not, when podcasts first started, people didn't make any money on them. They just recorded a show for other people to consume on a subject that they were passionate about because they loved that subject. And because it's a hobby or interest that you have, you will recognize that passion that these people have making that podcast. And that will spur not only the interest that you already have, but it will kind of motivate you and get you geared up about the interest continuing on. So, again, almost any subject you can think of there's a podcast out there. Gary, which one are your favorite hobbies?
I like to listen to comedians talking about podcasts.
I think Jason and I did one of those. And why are podcasts so popular? Well, a lot of the reasons I've already spoke to. Convenience. There's very convenient because you can, again, with your smartphone, you can take that with you anywhere. How many times have you gone to a doctor's appointment and you're waiting? And you're going, well, I guess I'll just, kind of scroll through my phone. Scroll through your phone. Well, you could also take that opportunity to listen to a podcast. Listen to someone that you enjoy them talking about a particular subject. Again, you could be cooking and set up a way of listening to the podcast in your kitchen while you cook. You could listen to a podcast about cooking while you're cooking. Again, convenience. It's a very convenient way of listening to a show on a subject you enjoy whenever you want. Diversity. And what I mean by that is, we've already talked about that a little bit. It's almost any subject you can think of. If it's about knitting, history, books, politics, movies, and any sort of entertainment. There's a podcast out there. There's wild amounts of choices available for you to listen to. And we already talked about on the go. You can take it with you. It's in your pocket. You can bring that with you anywhere. Everyone brings their phone everywhere. Now at this point, we're all kind of disconnected if we don't have our phone in our pocket. So if you have your phone in your pocket, it's already there. It's already there. You could come, say you come to the senior center for lunch, but you're one of those people that kind of like to be a little on your own. You could come here for lunch, put on your headphones, and listen to a podcast while you're eating your lunch. It's on the go. Take it with you. A lot of times what I'll do is when I go grocery shopping, yes, I know this is horrible. When I go grocery shopping, I will put my headphones in, and as I grocery shop, I will be listening to a podcast as I grocery shop. Again, on the go, easy to consume, listen when you want to. Now, this is the important thing. And this is the one I'm probably going to get the most questions throughout the entire process is, how do I listen to a podcast? Good question. Well, you listen to a podcast through what we call the podcast apps. Who here knows what I mean when I say app? Okay, there's a couple of you. So an app is a piece of software. Hi, guys. An app is a piece of software that's on your phone. Your calendar app is an app. Let me get my phone out. Remind me. Your mail app is an app. Your weather app is an app. So any piece of software that's on your phone, most times people will refer to them as an app. Okay. Now, can I get a little show of hands? And some of you may not know, how many people have iPhones?
I don't.
Okay, and how many people have Android phones? Okay, so you do kind of know the difference between the iPhone and the Android phone. If you don't know what phone you have, chances are it's an Android phone. But if you want me to identify later on after, I can help you with that. So if you have a phone and you're using an iPhone, an Apple product, what you can use to access podcasts is the clever name, the Apple Podcast app. And you can find that it's a purple button on your phone. And generally for the iPhone, it comes pre-installed on your phone, just waiting for you. If you've never used it and you have an iPhone, you've probably gone through it going, I don't know what that does. I have no idea what this app does. The Apple Podcast app is how you would get podcasts on your iPhone. Now, if you don't have an iPhone, you can access podcasts through an app called Spotify. Now, Spotify is known as a music app, mostly. Most people, you have to pay a subscription to get music off that app. But you can also use the app to access podcasts. So if you have an Android phone, you would install, because it wouldn't come pre-installed on your Android phone, you'd have to install that app, and then you could access podcasts from that app. So again, on the iPhone, probably the podcast app is already on there. And for the Android phone, you'd probably have to. Now, you could also install Spotify on your iPhone so if you're already subscribing to Spotify as a music service, you could then just use it as your source of getting podcasts into your phone as well. Again, it's not a difficult process, but I know some of you might not be as comfortable using your phones. That's what grandchildren are for. He said, come here and show me. And I can guarantee you, your grandchildren know what a podcast is, and a lot of adult children probably know what a podcast is. Podcasts have really grown significantly, again, over the last couple of years, to the point that, it's a joke that everyone has a podcast. I mean, I have a podcast. And it is a good way of getting information out there and entertainment out there. Now, yes, Gary.
You said you have a podcast?
I have a podcast.
Is it called Paul's Podcast?
No. It's a podcast that we have through our department, and we call it Sweet Talk. CWET Talk. Sweet Talk.
Is that a dating podcast?
No. It's a community outreach podcast. Our department reaches out to community people to talk about what they're doing for our community, and we have a 20-minute conversation with them. We actually set a timer and everything. We have a 20-minute conversation to find out what they're doing in our community, and it's very conversational. And that's another thing about it. I said the talk show format before, and that's what the thing that really drives people, attracts people to the podcast, is that conversational format. You start listening to a podcast that schedules themselves on a regular basis, you almost become like kind of intimately comfortable with the people that are broadcasting them. You feel like they're your friends. You feel that you can trust them, and they have the same interests that you do. And having, especially wearing earbuds, it's like this really intimate connection when you're listening to them, and you feel the sense of friendship towards them. And every time they produce a new episode, you go, oh, they have a new episode out. That's great. I get to listen to my two friends have talks about what on a subject I'm really interested in. Now, we talked about the phone. Now, a few of you, yes, sir.
Phil, before you go on, are you addressing this as an app that's streaming things or downloading the file itself?
Good question. Actually, you can do both. So you can stream a podcast onto your phone if you have a wireless connection or you're using cell data. I don't recommend cell data unless you have an unlimited plan. But you could stream it through your wireless connection that you use at home, or a business, or again, you can use cell data and just stream the podcast right to your phone. Both podcasts, Spotify and Apple Podcasts, has the ability to download the episode of the podcast. So you could download your podcast, so that way if you go to the store or the doctor and you don't want to use cell data, you can download it using your wireless connection at home, and then listen to it later on, and then just delete it off your phone after you're finished listening to it. So you do have that ability to. I'm sorry, sir, did you hear that question that he asked? Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm not answering something you didn't even hear the question on. Yes, sir.
Phil, would you say that YouTube would be a very good example of streaming?
YouTube is an example of streaming. Maybe I didn't make myself clear. So YouTube is an example of streaming the video, whereas podcast usually is just an audio format. So yes, so streaming YouTube, yes. So you're streaming YouTube, you're not downloading content, you're just streaming it. Podcast, you can stream that as well, but you do have the option of downloading it. Therefore, again, I don't know how many of you know that you could hook your phone up to your wireless router at home. If you have a wireless router at home, you can hook it up to a wireless router, saving you cell data at home. Then you could download podcasts at home and bring it with you and not worry about using up your cell data. Because some of you, I know I do, look at your cell data and you go, I'm streaming too much stuff. So you do have that option of connecting to a wireless connection and downloading it for later on. Gary, you have a question? You got that look in your eye like you have a question, man.
Good. You lost me at router, though. So.
Router?
I'm going, all right.
Your wireless connection at home. I guess you don't need to know router.
You say so.
We haven't talked about the last way of playing podcasts. So I've talked about smartphones, but maybe not everyone has a smartphone. If you have a computer at home, you can still listen to your podcast on a computer. So the way that you can listen to a podcast on your computer, if you have a Mac computer, again, you can use the Apple Podcast app. Clever name. So if you have a Mac computer, you just, and it's already downloaded on your computer, you can just listen to podcasts on the Apple Podcast app on your Mac. If you have a Windows-based computer, which most people have a Windows-based computer, that's a little more work because app won't be pre-installed on your computer. So app would be 3 apps that we have up here, Spotify, and then iTunes. iTunes is still on Windows. So you could either download Spotify, iTunes, or there's another app called Grover. So there's 3 apps that you could download on your Windows computer. iTunes, Spotify, or Grover. Now iTunes is really clunky on Windows. In fact, iTunes is only for the Windows 10 format. Apple's replaced their music player app on everything else. So it's a little clunky. Spotify is probably going to be the most smoothest and easiest to operate. And then Grover is a fairly new podcast app. I haven't had a lot of chance to play with it myself, but it's available for Windows.
Do they cost you?
Good question.
Oh, I should have waited.
No. Please ask me a question whenever you feel like it. I want this more of a kind of interactive presentation. I know I do have a little question answer thing at the end, but this is kind of a short presentation, so we're just going to go with the questions. Just shout them out when you have them. So the woman asked if they cost money. Generally, no. And the apps are typically easily available through what we call on iPhone, the Android phone, and Windows, the App Store. So basically, each one of these devices has what's called the App Store, and that's how you would find the apps. Like Spotify, you would go to the App Store on your Android phone, do a search for Spotify, it would pop up, and then you could install it. Now, all the apps that I've mentioned have no cost. Okay? Spotify has a cost for music, but not a cost for podcasts. But I can tell you right now, it's a little aggravating when you see all these music choices on the app and going, I can't play those. I can't play those. But if you're just doing podcasts, then there's no cost. They may ask you to register with them in order to use the piece of software, but they have no cost. Most of them will ask you to register anyway. That's the cost, is registering with them, your email and your name, so that they know who you are. But that's almost any app nowadays. When you download it and install it on your phone, they're going to say, who are you? Thank you for your information. So again, Microsoft Store is on Windows. Apple App Store is on iPhone, and the Android Play Store, that's what it's called, Play Store, is on the Android phone. And you can recognize it by these symbols. So you can see that the little shopping cart bag is the Microsoft one. Generally, you just hit the start button, and you'll see the store after you've hit the start button. On Windows 10, you'll see that. Older computers, it may be a little more difficult to find. On the iPhone, it's that blue one that says A, and then on the Android phone, it's that play symbol, if you're looking for the app for the store. Now, the store apps should be right on your phone, because they want you to download things. And again, be careful, because other apps do cost money, but these apps that I've talked about are free. So how do I know what to listen to? That's the whole thing is, I can tell you there's thousands of podcasts. How do I find something I want to listen to? Well, most of the apps that I've talked about will have a section where it's going to suggest things that you should listen to. And the more that you listen, the more that they'll kind of customize what they'll suggest for you. But initially, you may have to search for something that you want to listen to. Hold on just one second. This is going to be a little wonky. So that's my phone. And the upper purple block is a widget for my Apple Podcast app. Okay? So I would press the Apple Podcast app, and then in the lower portion of that screen, you'll see Listen Now, Browse, Library, Search. Do you see that? Right at the bottom. Hold on a second. So if I was fresh and brand new to this app, I've never been here before, what I could do, two things. I could hit the Browse button, and then it's going to bring up a bunch of recommendations for stuff for me to listen to. Because it was Valentine's Day yesterday, they have a lot of dating podcasts that are available to listen to. So we have This Is Dating, Spotlight, Meet Cute, How to Do It, I just see Surviving and Thriving. So all of these podcasts, and then if you go down, they have some new and noteworthy. So these are new podcasts that have been recently uploaded. So I have those available that I could choose. And, up close and personal, I think this is based on stuff I've listened to in the past. So if you look at this, then this is a way of finding something, is to do the browse and kind of just look to see what they have available. The other way is to click on the magnifying glass and do a search. Let's see. I am a reader, so I am going to search for Stephen King. I want to know if there are any podcasts out there on the author Stephen King. So I'm going to search. And right there you see that there's, up in the up corner it says shows. Okay, and then down below it's going to say channels and then episodes. So shows are actually full shows that are about Stephen King. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a bunch of podcasts that are just Stephen King. So I can at that point click on one, and the latest episode is right there, ready for me to play.
Wow.
Wow.
I have a question.
Yes.
What about, you don't want ads? Spotify says, can you do one without ads?
Spotify, again, I'm not as familiar. They may play ads during the course of your podcast. Again, Spotify is more of, hey, we want our money type of situation. So they may play ads. Those ads may start at the beginning and at the end of the podcast episode, typically, I believe. Again, cost of doing business if you're not paying for a paid account. I know Apple Podcasts, which I'm the most familiar with, they do not have ads on the podcast for Apple Podcasts, but unfortunately, that's for iPhone devices. If you think of it as old-style radio talk show, and you get an ad when the show starts and when the show ends, you kind of go, I can deal with that because I've listened to commercials. And again, free apps are never free. And that's the thing. Either it's the cost of your information to register, or it's that and ads. So just be aware of that. And again, don't get sucked into the paying for a subscription when you don't have to. But music, having the ability to play any music you want is a great thing as well. But that's also comes with a fee as well. And I don't know if any of you guys have music subscriptions right now? No one? Oh, I should have done a whole episode of music subscriptions.
I use Pandora.
You use Pandora. Well, Pandora's, is it still free, Trent?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So Pandora is more of an actual radio, is playing songs based on your likes, but with ads. But you really have no control other than, I think, a couple of fast forwards, right? Yeah, likes and don't like. So it learns about you. Podcasts are a little different. They're going to give you some ads. And also, like radio talk shows, some of the podcasts you listen to actually read their own ads. That's how they make money sometimes on their podcasts, is they're reading ads. Again, think of it as a radio talk show. You're going to get some ads as you listen sometimes. And other times they have no monetary income coming in at all, and they won't talk about ads. They won't talk about selling anything. They'll just give out the information, and that's it. So as you can see, it's pretty easy to search for something you want to listen to. Again, it's, hey, what am I really interested in? Are you really interested in books? Are you really interested in movies? Are you really interested in history, medieval history? What is it that you're looking for and you'd like to listen to? And again, what's great again is it's on your time. So if you say, oh, I haven't listened to my podcast in 3 months, well, chances are when you go back 3 months, there'll be a bunch of episodes waiting for you to listen to. I don't know how many times I've binged, episodes of a podcast because it's been a while since I listened to it. Yes, Gary.
Are there podcasts for railroad enthusiasts?
I don't know. Hold on. I'm gonna delete my last search. Railroad. Yes, there are.
What if I wanted to request a podcast? Can I request a podcast?
What do you mean by request a podcast? Gary's asking if you can request a podcast.
Can I request a podcast on railroads from the 1950s, for example?
No, you can do a search.
You do a search.
Yes, you can do a search.
So I can't request a podcast to be made.
No. So you think of it as these are content creators who are recording subjects that they're passionate about and posting it, hoping that they have listeners who want to come and listen to what they've created. Again, that's really what the internet's all about, is you create something hoping someone will come to you to listen to it. Yes, Trent?
I think Gary's question is a very interesting question because if you look at eBay,
Yes.
you can be a seller on eBay, but you can also be a buyer.
Buyer, yes.
And say, look, I'm looking for XYZ. So the podcasts don't allow you to do that. The consumer All you have is the search and hoping that somebody's already made.
Right, exactly. I mean, I imagine, here's the thing though, most podcasters have contact information. And we already seen that there's a bunch of railroad podcasters out there. So sometimes you could contact the podcasters and say, this is a subject, I'm interested in railroads of 1950s. Have you done an episode? Are you considering doing an episode? I have not done it, but I have heard of the people who are listeners to the podcast actually helping build what they want to listen to. So again, almost every podcast has some sort of contact information that goes along with it, so you can contact the podcasters. In fact, most times the way they wrap up their shows, their talk shows, is they ask you, hey, click subscribe, and if you need to contact us, here's my email. So, and most of them will have a web page as well associated with their podcast as well. So even though you're going to the podcast app to listen, you can go to web pages, and a lot of times they'll have a play right on their web page. Not as convenient because you need to go to their web page to listen. And again, that might be if you don't want to use an app and you want to listen on your computer, you could visit just the web page. The trouble is finding someone. So, that's right. So that would be my next thing, I think. Let me shut this down. Stop hearing. Okay. Google searches. That's another way to find something to listen to.
I found this on the web.
No, I didn't ask you. Siri. So Google searches. If you have a computer and you're trying to find a podcast, you can do a Google search. My recommendation is to type the subject and then the word podcast. And that's another way of finding a podcast. And that would lead you directly to, like I said, the podcaster's webpage. And a lot of times they'll have an embedded link so you can listen right from the webpage as well. So again, that's a way of circumventing the whole app thing. It's just a little more difficult, well, maybe a lot more difficult to find something you want to listen to. If you don't want to listen through the app, you could use the app to search and find something, then go to the web page from your computer and listen that way. You had a question?
Yes, because as you sign up, it asks for your birth date. I don't like putting that on there. How do you get around that?
There's no way to get around that.
That's why they know all about you.
That's why they see, and again, this is what I always.
It's not worth it.
That's what and then that maybe listening from your Windows computer might be the best thing to do. I think iTunes doesn't ask you for your birth date. They're going to ask you for your email and your name. But I don't think they ask for your birth date. And I don't think Grover does either. So those would be two on your computer that you could consider. There are also other podcast apps out there as well. If you go to the App Store and do a search for podcasts, you will find other podcast apps. I mentioned the ones in this presentation because they're the most popular and to find, but there are other podcasts. I think there's several podcasts out there, and many of them may not ask for that particular information. Again, Spotify is really money-based, so that's probably why they want to get as much information to you to focus ads your way. So there are. After this presentation, maybe we can do a search together and we can come up with an alternate list. Okay?
Or we can all use your name and your birthday.
That's good. Doesn't like that.
Yeah, I'll post that right now. Because there's no way that will go wrong. Thanks, Gary, for the help. Okay, so I've already told you, yes, sir.
I just want to point out, even though I'm not into not telling truth, but you don't have to tell the truth on your birth date either.
Oh yeah, that's true. You don't have to tell the truth on your birthday. So this is a complete aside. This is a complete aside. Apple on the iPhone has added a new feature where you can give them a fake email address and not have to give out your real email address, which I think Android should do that as well, because they'll make up a fake that will send basically will send the verification email to this email, then send to your real email, but then they don't have your real email. You can just drop that as soon as you verify. But again, that's a good security feature that the iPhone has. Hopefully Android someday will pick that up. But yes, lying to someone who just wants to sell you things is okay. Is okay. Yes.
Political lying has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's continuing, it's getting stronger with all of these.
Well,
We're not gonna go there.
and that's kind of ads in itself as well. So good point. You don't have to give them real information. They will send you an email a lot of times. They want to send you an email to verify that you actually exist, but then you can just unsubscribe to any newsletter or something that they put you on. But there are alternatives to Spotify. There are alternatives to Spotify. And I believe they're less intrusive. Again, Spotify is just the one that's going to have more, because we're going to talk about this, subscribe. So on the apps that I've mentioned, not only can you listen to your podcasts, you can also subscribe to that podcast. And what I mean is that they give you an opportunity to subscribe so that the newest episode automatically goes into what's called your feed. So when you start up your podcast app, that episode is already listed there, ready for you to listen to. So it's a nice way of not forgetting. Yes, Anita?
You may have already said this, but does this bog down your phone?
Anita's asking me if listening to podcasts will bog down your phone. So the app itself is only an app, like any other app. So it's going to use some CPU when you're running it. And because you're listening to media, it will use some resources. Will it be a detriment to your phone? It depends. How much memory your phone has, how fast your phone is. I find that for the most part, it's not detrimental. But if someone has maybe a phone that's maybe 5-6 years old, they may see some slowdown if they're listening to a podcast. But if you get a phone call or you're trying to do something else, just shut down the podcast at that point until you're finished. What's nice about the Apple phone, and again, I'm an Apple guy, is when I'm listening to a podcast and someone calls me, it automatically pauses my podcast till I finish my phone call, and then we'll restart it once I'm finished. I don't know if Android will do that.
It does.
It does. Android will do that as well. So basically, it will pause that function while you're on the phone. Okay. And if you're going to do some other thing like check your mail or, and I'm only saying this on older phones. Newer phones, you won't even notice if you're using a couple apps while you're listening to a podcast. But yes, sir.
Is there a distinction then again between streaming and downloading? Because some phones have limited amount of memory.
Right. Some phones do have a limited amount of memory. And if you're streaming, it's going to use CPU memory. If you're playing back, it will use CPU memory, not as much, but it's going to use your space on your storage space on your phone. That's why I also recommend once you finish listening to something, delete it off your phone so you're not using as much space. Some podcast apps, you can design them so that once you listen to them, you can set the settings. You can set the settings so once you've listened to the episode, it will automatically delete it off your phone. Yes, did you have a question over there? No. Yes, Anita.
Can you tell Annalee, I apologize, she came in late. She wants to know what the difference is between iPad or Android and Apple.
So the difference between, I'm going to try to make this as concise as possible. The difference between an iPhone and an Android phone is the operating system. Basically, the way you interface with your phone. So basically when you open your phone and you see the layout and the swipes you do and the gestures you have to make to open apps and to manipulate everything on your phone is different on the two. With that comes some different functionality as well, but that's probably the most concise way I can explain it. Yes, Trent?
I think maybe what she's asking is, iPhones say iPhone on them. If it says anything else, it's an Android.
Yes. Yeah. So iPhone, the iPhone operating system, which is called iOS, is exclusively for the iPhone. Apple makes the iPhone, they have the iOS, and that's the phone. Now, Android is an operating system that is more open source, meaning freely given to other companies. So if you have a Samsung phone, if you have an LG phone, if you have, Gary, another brand? What's
Chevrolet.
Chevrolet phone. So chances are it's going to have what's called the Android app. And usually the Android operating system, operating system, the Android app, is kind of flavored differently for each phone. There'll be a lot of similarities, but each phone will have a slightly different version of it. But for the most part, iPhones, iOS, and most other phones are Android operating system. Yes, Gary?
Are those the two main systems that are out there?
Yes, as far as I know, those are the two main operating systems for smartphones. If you come across a phone that has something different, I would steer clear, because that would be a really wonky one. I haven't heard of anyone coming out with any sort of different operating system. Again, Android is pretty much anything other than iPhone, and iPhone is iOS. Again, I'm an Apple guy because I have a Mac, I have an iPad, I have a phone, so it all kind of interconnected together, and that's what I like. Now, Android phone is a great phone. In fact, I have this running joke with people in my office about how they make fun of me for using an iPhone and why they have their real phones. So it's preference. It's preference. So, I like iPhones because I'm an Apple guy. Yes, Trent.
Well, when I came to ISU in 1981, I started out with Apples and Macs, but I got to the point where I couldn't communicate with the rest of the university because the rest of the university was all Android, and I could so. I had to change.
Yeah, I think part of that, Trent, was the cost. I think everyone jokes about the Apple tax. So the Apple tax, meaning that Apple products are generally more expensive than other products. And part of the reason why Apple products are more expensive than other products is, number one, the build quality of what they're putting together, and two, generally they're not taking your information and they're not following you, so they're not getting money from ads or selling your information, whereas Windows and Android products, they're more closely watching you, and that's how they get their revenue post you buying the equipment. Apple's kind of like, you're buying my equipment and that's all the money we're going to get from you. Yes, Trent?
Kathleen just mentioned to me, our son-in-law Saturday went up to an antique shop and bought an antique plaque for Triumph motorcycles.
Yes.
He has an iPhone.
Yes.
That night, he had a whole bunch of Facebook contacts from motorcycle outfits.
So that's the whole thing is Facebook.
That's a
Facebook thing. And here's the thing that maybe a lot of people don't know. iPhone, in the last update to their operating system, added a feature so that you can go in and turn off all the followings from other apps. So, in fact, Facebook just said that they're going to lose $1 billion this year because iPhone added that feature. So if he went into the app and checked to see who's tracking him, he could actually shut that off, and they would no longer track. He wouldn't get those targeted ads anymore. So but he still get ads from Facebook, but he wouldn't get the targeted ads, and they wouldn't be following him. Again, a lot of companies not happy with Apple after the last operating system update because they added that new feature of turning off the tracking on the other apps.
Well, can we turn off Facebook off of our phones? so we're not followed?
Only if you delete it off your phone. Even when you don't, yeah, if you delete, if you
Why is
delete.
it so important to have it on? I'm just-
I don't say it's important. I don't even have a Facebook account. I don't even have a Facebook account. So yeah, it's not important to me. If it's not important to you, get rid of it. Get rid of it. Because they're really just selling you ads, and I don't think, to me personally, that's why I left my Facebook account, is because I didn't think I was getting any benefit that was worth the cost, if you understand what I mean. So yeah, if you want to get rid of Facebook, get rid of Facebook, and then they can't follow you from what you do on your phone. But again, with iPhone, if you have Facebook, you can turn off all the tracking, not just on iPhone, but on Instagram and all those other platforms, social media platforms.
Go ahead,
Trent?
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, we were at a play last night, and I was sitting right next to an FBI agent here in town. And I said, I don't even use Facebook, and he said, you're pretty safe then.
Yeah, if you're...
Because otherwise your phone isn't being...
Yeah, and that's the whole thing is almost any app you put in is going to do some sort of following. And that's the one thing. So podcast, if you're going to download a podcast app, they're probably going to follow you in the background a little bit. Depends how much information they're going to. Yes, sir.
Well, I was going to say that if you Google something, a search on Google, you have a Gmail account,
Oh yeah.
now you've got a real 1-2 combination.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how many times we all looked and going, hey, I'm looking for sweaters, and you start doing searches for sweaters, and then all of a sudden in your Gmail thing you have all these posts for sweaters, and you're going, huh. But again, Google is a free service. That's the thing is, nothing's free. Nothing's free. So the cost is they're tracking your data. This is Gary, this is going totally in a different direction than I thought it was going to go. Yes.
So back to the podcast.
Back to the podcast.
You say we can subscribe,
Yes.
and it's also easy to unsubscribe.
Oh yeah. So basically, on the iPhone in the Apple Podcast app, there's when you go to the listen to, you get the 3 buttons in the right-hand corner. I think we've all seen those 3 buttons that accesses a menu. So you get the 3 buttons, and then to subscribe, you'll see follow. If you go to the podcast again, that will change to unfollow. So similar thing with Spotify. I'm not sure what the term that they use for subscribing, but again, you can subscribe, and then every time I open up my podcast app, I see all my new episodes listed, and I can pick what I want to listen to then. And again, it's what the trouble with going down the podcast rabbit hole is. I've got 20 new episodes today, and there's only 24 hours in a day, and I need to sleep during 8 of them. Oh, and I have to work too. So it's like there's so much content, and it's kind of a good thing, but also it could be a daunting thing. I have gone through every so often and kind of purge, going, I can't remember the last time I listened to this one. I can't remember the last time I was this one. But that's what's great about a podcast is all the choices that you have. So many, and again, on that Stephen King search that we did, you saw there was multiple Stephen King podcasts that I could listen to. So I could subscribe to 5 different Stephen King podcasts and know the most about Stephen King's writings that I would ever want to know, ever. Same thing with almost any subject. You can find multiple sources. You can subscribe to those, pull them up. They'll already be in your feed when they open up and go, oh, I've got a new podcast. And here's one little aside is, so people will start podcasts, they'll be very passionate about it, and then they won't do their podcast anymore. But what's great about that is the content stays on the internet. And a lot of times this content's not dated, like medieval history. Chances are a podcast about medieval history, that information is going to be relevant, going forward. So even if someone did like 100 episodes of medieval history and they stopped doing their podcast, you could still search it, and even though it's not an active podcast, you still have all those past episodes. So again, unlike a radio talk show where it's done and it's gone, you could go back to it later on down the road and come back and listen to content and enjoy it still. In fact, the disappointing thing is when you find a really great podcast that has now ended and you go, oh, it's over. It's over. I can't listen to it anymore. They're done. They didn't make any episode after this one. Oh, I'm so sad. So, yes?
Is there anything that keeps track of what podcasts you listen to?
I think I know what you're saying. So, yes. What happens is if you subscribe. If you just listening, oh yeah, there is. Because as you go listen to podcasts, the recommendations should change. So based on what you've listened to, the apps usually start learning what you like and make suggestions. And what I mean by that is kind of in the most rudimentary way is if you're listening to a Stephen King podcast, your recommendations may be number one, other book sites, or number two, other horror sites that they'll recommend going, hey, you like the Stephen King podcast? Here's some horror podcasts and here's some book podcasts. But then as you listen to some of those, then the recommendations should narrow a little bit more. Yes, Gary?
Yeah, but is there any record of everything you've listened to that you can go back and look at, hey, did I listen to this already?
Right, that's what I was wondering.
Not that I know of. I know sometimes I have done it. Started listening going, I've listened to this before. But it still was on the list. It shouldn't, particular episodes shouldn't come up in your recommendations. But that doesn't mean that you won't find them again on your own and go, oh, this sounds interesting. And go, oh, I've listened to this one. It's a rarity because there's so much to listen to. And if you subscribe, it should come off your new episode list. So if you're subscribing to a podcast and you listen to that episode that's on your subscribe list, once you listen to it, it should drop off your list, if you know what I mean. But if you're just not subscribed and you're listening to what you're listening to, it won't keep track of that stuff. Does that answer your question?
Kind of.
Okay.
I was thinking if I want to do research on ancient civilizations and I want to revisit what I've already listened to, is there some kind of a list to access? I listen to all of these. So I can go back to those.
So I believe there's a way of creating a playlist so that you could create a playlist in Apple Podcasts anyway, and you could take an episode and put it into your playlist. So if you've listened to something, you could put it into your playlist and then review your playlist and know, these are all the ones I've listened to. And also, that would also give you a source of going back to them if you needed to. So, and I think Spotify may have a similar thing that you can create a playlist. Any other questions? I got just a couple more slides. Cost. Okay. I think someone asked about this earlier. So we talked about the apps. The apps not really having costs except for information. The apps cost you information. Now, does a podcast cost you money? No. So once you have the app installed on your phone or your computer, you can subscribe to a podcast and it costs you nothing. Does it cost you anything to just listen? No, it doesn't cost you anything to just listen. Podcasts are typically free. Generally what they'll do is they'll get money from either tying ads to the beginning or the end if they're ad related, or reading ads during their podcast, or some of them don't even have anything to do with ads whatsoever. They're just posting their podcast and just playing it. I have some podcasts that I listen to. I listen to a Patton Oswalt podcast, and him and his wife do it together, and they will read ads that company has given them right in the middle of their podcast. So they'll, like an old-time radio show, they'll read their ads and move on. Some of them will have pre-recorded ads that they'll have within their podcast, and again, some will have absolutely no ads whatsoever. I guess it's where the station is. If a podcast is nationally popular, they may have people that will approach them about reading ads and give them money to read those ads. If it's more of a local and they don't have a larger following, they might not have any ads. And again, you think of it as a old-time radio show. It's certainly not the amount of ads you have like watching a YouTube video. But, so you'll see a couple of, yes, you know exactly what I'm saying, Ray, don't you? So you'll have a couple of ads during the course of a podcast if they're popular. A lot of times the ads are actually related to the subject that they have their podcast about. Like, say you like Stephen King again. Say you like Stephen King, you're subscribing to something, they will run ads for either a DVD that's coming out, or a convention that's coming up, or something that's related to the subject that their podcast is about in many cases. Not always, but in many cases. Sometimes if they're really big podcasters and they have a large following, it would be like just kind of them reading a commercial for, dishware or something like that, something that's, not even related to the subject. Again, it depends on their popularity, how much they can make from reading ads. And again, a lot of times it's just reading ads or it's pre-recorded, but in a lot of cases there are no ads because they're a smaller podcast and they may have a good subscription base, but are not enough to deserve an ad revenue. You said that probably Spotify is putting ads into the playing of the podcast. Again, because Spotify is definitely an ad. So if you're not paying that monthly subscription, they're going to run ads during the course of you listening to on their software. Apple Podcast does not put ads into the system, and I believe some of the others don't either. But again, you're going to probably hear some ads here and there. But for actual monetary money, no. There is no out of pocket. Now Spotify, again, if you load Spotify app, you might go, oh wow, they have music too. I could listen to any music I want if I pay $4.99 a month. Well, that's how they get you. They go, hey, we have podcasts, but did you see that we have music as well? So, but again, music apps, music streaming, that's a totally different thing. I do enjoy the subscription services. We've had a lot of questions throughout the entire process. Yes, I haven't heard from you all presentation.
How is information on that screened? You can't just put anything on there, can you?
What do you mean?
The subject that's in there, can I personally put something on there?
Oh yeah, so on the podcast, if you mean you're looking for something, on the podcast, each podcast will have a search field. So like usually they'll signify it by having the magnifying glass symbol, and you can search for what you're looking for in the podcast app. So basically you'll press the search button and you'll type in what it is you're looking for, and the results of the search will come up in the app itself. But you'll find it through a magnifying symbol.
No, that wasn't exactly, what am I going to find on there? Just anything? I don't want any pornography and bad stuff on dating sites and things like that.
Well, there's,
Screened, in other words.
To be perfectly honest with you, the podcasts are not for pornography, but there may be sites that people are more open with their speech, and they're going to say, other words that maybe you're not comfortable with, but you don't have to listen. So if you do a search, and again, based on your search and stuff you listen to, it should start customizing your recommendations. So all I can say is initially there might be some things that you go, what is that doing there? But as you listen to things and as you play things, that search and that recommendation should narrow to things that you prefer, if you understand what I'm saying.
What about children listening?
I would definitely operate the machine yourself before giving it to children. Again, these are talk show type things. They're not kids programs. Typically, to be perfectly honest with you, I have not seen any podcasts really geared towards kids. And if you think about it, most talk shows that you would listen to on the radio are not geared towards kids either. So again, you have to use that talk show analogy to kind of go forward. Talk shows have all kinds of different, more grown-up content and not typically for kids. You may find podcasts for parenting on on the, when you do a search, but that's, again, that's not for kids, that's for parents. Yes, Trent?
Well, and again, in answer to that question, if you spend a lot of time listening to podcasts on how to make bombs, you may have the FBI visit your home shortly.
I don't know if FBI would be following you, but yes. Yes, Trent, are you trying to tell us something?
Well, just an answer to this, if podcasts are not as screened as much as other things,
Right.
for example, Facebook's gotten into a lot of trouble lately, and they say that they, quote, screen what goes on there, but it sounds like podcasts are not even screened at that level.
To be perfectly honest with you, Trent, I haven't seen any, well, the only thing, yes, there's one podcast that has been up for controversy lately. You're aware, right? Joe Rogan's podcast that has been in the news as being controversial recently. He's exclusively on Spotify. And basically content that he has said in the past that has been politically charged, that he's getting some backlash. Again, here's the thing. Unlike social media, the podcast company is more interpreted as being a publisher because they're putting out the content that someone's... So I haven't seen a lot of controversial posts about that, not as much as social media. I think it's because, again, these are more talk shows, so they have conversations and they have things more in context rather than one line of a posting that can be taken out of context or ignited based on just one line. The podcast is a longer format that generally consists of conversations that are in context, and it's more understood the meanings behind them. Does that make sense? Yes, Gary?
If the Senior Activity Center wanted to host its own podcast, could they do that?
Hold on a second. Oh, where is it? My computer just died. The last slide is not on here. I thought it was. Oh. So, my last slide is missing. It was the, how do I make a podcast? That's for another time. So, I told you before that we host a podcast. Wait, did I go over the hour already? So, I told you before that we host a podcast on our department. And over that time, over the 4 years we've been doing a podcast, I've learned a lot. I've learned quite a bit. And that's a knowledge base that I probably could share with people that were interested in creating a podcast. Thing is, though, that's a whole different presentation. And if you would like me back to talk about that, what I need probably maybe even a sign-up sheet, because that would be more detailed, and probably you want people who have, who really want to spend the time. Because I spent an hour, well, that went by really fast. I just spent an hour in talking about creating a podcast would probably be even longer conversation, because that would bring up a lot more questions about technology and technique and equipment and so forth, and then problem solving and how to and so forth. And I would love to do that. I would absolutely enjoy. I was talking to Ray beforehand, and he got me going in just like 5 minutes. Yes, Gary.
So the answer is yes.
Yes, the answer is yes, Gary. Yes. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
We have an exercise class.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, if you have any questions about my presentation or want to reach out to me, my email is Dickey, Dickey, @isu.edu. And again, if you want me, yes, Gary.
And what's your birth date? So we have that.
Let me give you my date of birth. Oh, don't give them your date of birth. Oh my God, don't give them your date of birth. Yes, sir.
picture up with the donut? There was a donut on that?
The donut?
The donut.
Which one?
I saw it on your screen.
A donut,
Further down.
there's a donut over there.
Keep going.
Are you kidding, Roy?
There we go.
There.
Oh.
These are the symbols for the apps. So, let me,
Donut.
so the one on the left is Spotify, the one in the middle is iTunes, and the one on the right is Grover.
Okay, I noticed there's an equal sign on that donut. What does that equal sign mean?
I think it's supposed to represent a mouse because it's a Grover. It's so the app's called Grover, and that's their logo.
I think it's a microphone.
I think it's a
Looks
microphone.
like a mic.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a microphone. It's a microphone.
Oh, it's not equal to overweight, is it?
Well, what are you trying to say? Well, I don't know. I feel attacked. So, how many people would be interested in a presentation on how to? Oh, wow. All right, excellent, excellent. So, I probably would schedule, with Pam's and Anita's permission, probably schedule something like that, and maybe that would be more of a sit-down kind of thing. I'll probably want to have the screen so I can share my screen, but we can sit down kind of together and have a little more intimate presentation, and that way, because there's a lot to go over, and you'll need time. This will be way longer than an hour. And again, we probably won't even go through everything on that one time. Maybe it might even be multiple sessions, but again, Ray, I could go on and on and on and on. Yes, sir.
Phil, if you did a deal on this next presentation, would you gain anything by coming with your cell phone or a laptop or something that you could?
Probably not. I would bring if you're going to bring your laptop, I would bring it for notes, because we'll be going over a lot of stuff. Maybe that's why I think I'll probably break it up in different sections, so I'm not like giving you so much stuff at once. But we'll probably go over the basics of how, because there's basically, why would you want to create a podcast? What content would you have on a podcast? What technology would you have on a podcast? What's the procedure on how to record a podcast? And how do you post a podcast? So that's a lot of information, and that's why it probably would be split up in a section. So I would recommend, like I said, what's the best way for you taking notes? That's what you would bring. Maybe if you had access to the internet, if we looked at some equipment, you could save those pages or those Amazon pages in for equipment. If I made some suggestions, also, what if I didn't want to spend any equipment? What's the cheapest way to get out of this as well? So there's, that's a whole different. Again, that's a whole different ballgame. It's like going, if I want to do this the cheapest way possible, how can I do that? If I want to spend a little more on equipment, what would you suggest? If I want to create, so in our podcast that we do for our department, we double dip on content. I was telling Ray about this beforehand. Not only do we do audio, but we also record our sessions video, and we post those on YouTube. So we get YouTube content and podcast content at the same time. And you go, well, that might be something I might consider to do. And then you say, that's the question is, well, how do I do that, Paul? So there'll be lots of rabbit holes to go down. And I would definitely be again, here I am. I'm supposed to be finished my presentation. I'm going on.
So the answer is questions, yeah.
Yes, Gary. Gary's saying, Paul, wrap it up. Paul, wrap it up. All right, thank you so much.